Hello everyone. Today I am going to speak on diarrhea and drugs used for diarrhea. As we all know, diarrhea is a very common symptom that is seen at every now and then in each and every one of us. And rather than being a disease, it is a symptom that might have various causes. So let us go ahead with today's topic. Acute diarrhea is defined as a condition in which there is at least 3 or more loose liquid or watery bowel movements daily for less than 14 days. If there is diarrhea for a longer duration, that is loose stools for longer duration than 14 days, then we call it as chronic diarrhea. Diarrhea, according to the mechanism by which there is increase in the fluids in the bowel movements, is divided into secretory, osmotic, exudative, inflammatory and dysentery. So this is another classification wherein we take mechanism of action of the diarrhea into consideration. So let us start with the secretory diarrhea. There is an increased active secretion or inhibition of absorption of the contents in the intestine. In this kind of diarrhea, there is no structural damage to the intestine, and typically it is seen in cholera. In cholera, which is an infection caused by Vibrio cholerae bacteria, which releases a toxin known as cholera toxin. This toxin stimulates the secretion of anions, that is the chloride anions, due to which there is again flow of sodium along with it. Remember, wherever there is chloride there is sodium, wherever there is sodium there is chloride. So due to loss of chloride ions, there is also loss of sodium, and along with sodium goes the water. So this toxin leads to loss of chloride, and that leads to ultimately loss of water and sodium. This type of intestinal fluid secretion is isotonic with plasma. So it means that these secretions are going to happen even when the patient is fasting, and it is not going to stop even if there is severe sign of dehydration. This continues even when there is no oral food intake. So that is regarding the secretory diarrhea. Let's look at the osmotic diarrhea. So osmotic diarrhea occurs whenever there is consumption of a substance that is having a high osmolarity. So consumption of solutions with excessive sugar or excessive salt. So even having a drink which is containing excess of sugar, like a syrup, can lead to diarrhea. What happens is, this sugar or salt will drain the water from the intestine into the lumen of the bowel, and it will be taken away into the fecal matter, which leads to osmotic diarrhea. This occurs with maldigestion. So when food is ingested and it is not digested properly, it goes into the lower intestine, where it depending upon the osmotic property of these bowel undigested material, there is osmotic diarrhea. On the same mechanism, the osmotic laxatives act, which are used for treatment of constipation. Too much of magnesium or vitamin C or undigested lactose can produce osmotic diarrhea and distension of bowel. So magnesium sulfate is one of the antacids that is used. You might have seen it in the lecture of peptic ulcer. So magnesium increases the bowel movement, and due to its osmotic property, it also leads to diarrhea. Similarly, in patients of lactose intolerance, the lactose goes undigested into the large intestine, where due to its osmotic property there is osmotic diarrhea. The other reasons are fructose malabsorption. Patients who cannot digest fructose, or patients who receive sorbitol owing to their osmolar property, there is osmotic diarrhea. This kind of diarrhea stops whenever the offending agent is stopped. So a person, if on a laxative he stops to take the osmotic laxative, the diarrhea will stop. Then there is exudative type of diarrhea, wherein there is presence of blood and pus in the stool. This is typically seen in the Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, which are two types of inflammatory bowel diseases. It can also occur in severe infections such as the Escherichia coli or other forms of food poisoning. Then there is inflammatory diarrhea. In inflammatory diarrhea, there is damage to the mucosal lining or brush border. So there is damage to the intestinal lumen, due to which there is passive loss of protein rich fluids and decreased ability to absorb the fluid that is lost. So there are both things, there is decreased ability to absorb and there is loss of fluids due to the damage to the mucosal lining of the intestine. The features of inflammatory diarrhea contain the features of secretory, osmotic as well as exudative diarrhea. It can occur due to bacterial, viral, parasitic infections or autoimmune diseases. It can also be caused by chronic diseases like tuberculosis in patients with colon cancer and enteritis. Coming to dysentery. Dysentery is presence of blood that is visible or microscopic appearance of blood in the stools. This is common with bacteria like Shigella and Salmonella and the protozoa like Entamoeba histolytica. So this was about the types of diarrhea depending upon the pathophysiology behind the diarrhea. Let us look at the causes of diarrhea. Acute diarrhea is mostly caused by viruses like rotaviruses in children and norovirus in adults, but this kind of picture is less in developing countries like India. In India, most of the times acute diarrhea is due to bacteria. Acute diarrhea can also be caused by the bacteria like Campylobacter jejuni, Shigella, which causes shigellosis, Salmonella, which causes typhoid fever, and E. coli. As well as acute diarrhea is caused by toxins like toxins that are released by cholera bacteria, toxins released by staphylococci, etc. Parasites can also cause diarrhea like cryptosporidiasis caused by Cryptosporidium, giardiasis caused by Giardia lamblia, and amoebiasis caused by Entamoeba histolytica. Chronic diarrhea is mostly due to some medical chronic illness like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, celiac disease, irritable bowel syndrome, and bile acid malabsorption. So due to one or the other reason, the diarrhea ensues in such patients. Other medical illnesses like hyperthyroidism, wherein there is increase in the motility of the GI tract, and ischemic bowel disease, diarrhea can be seen. Diarrhea can also occur due to medications or ingestion of some toxins. So this can include laxatives, antacids like magnesium, the drugs used for acidity, that is heartburn medications, antibiotics which can cause superinfection with Clostridium difficile, use of prokinetic drugs which increase the motility of GI tract, and before the fluid in the intestine is absorbed, there is evacuation of the bowel. Chemotherapy and radiation also lead to damage to the uh, gastrointestinal mucosa and can lead to diarrhea. So these are all reasons of diarrhea. There might be many other causes that can lead to diarrhea. Even there is something known as diarrhea induced by emotions. So what happens in diarrhea is there is loss of fluids, and the patient has accompanying symptoms like fever, vomiting, and the patient might be in a status where he requires to be admitted in the hospital. So what is the therapeutic goal for the treatment of such patients? First is to prevent dehydration. So whatever loss of fluids is occurring, we have to stop that. To treat dehydration, whatever loss has occurred, we have to hydrate the patient and subside the symptoms of dehydration. To prevent nutritional damage, so whatever damage has occurred due to decrease in the food intake and the catabolic status that ensues due to diarrhea, that has to be prevented. And to reduce the duration and severity of diarrhea, so that is the fourth therapeutic goal. So whatever diarrhea is occurring, we need to reduce its duration and severity, that is to decrease the loss of fluids and to reduce the duration of the illness itself and the occurrence of future episodes, so to prevent the reoccurrence of such episodes. So these are the therapeutic goals for treatment of diarrhea. The drugs that are used for diarrhea can be divided into those that correct the dehydration, those that are that specifically target at the cause of the diarrhea, and those that lead to symptomatic relief or give supportive or has supportive value. So let us see those drugs which are used for correction of dehydration. Before going to the correction of dehydration, we need to see whether how much the patient is dehydrated. So the signs of dehydration are seen in the form of pulse, blood pressure, looking at the jugular veins, we call it as JVP, jugular venous pressure, and the skin turgor. So this is how we can look at the signs of dehydration or to what extent the dehydration has occurred. Remember, this dehydration means that there is loss of water along with electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and bicarbonate ions. This loss also leads to metabolic acidosis, because there is loss of these alkali, there is metabolic acidosis, and that can lead to death in severe cases. So what happens in dehydration is there is loss of normal stretchiness of skin. So this skin turgor, whenever we take a pinch the skin, it automatically regresses rapidly. During dehydration, this doesn't occur. The skin that is pinched takes time to regain its normal condition. Then there is irritable behavior. So irritable behavior is seen in children, and there is decreased urination, loss of skin color, and tachycardia. So these are the signs of hypovolemia, that is decreased urination, loss of skin color, and tachycardia. Tachycardia occurs due to reflex sympathetic stimulation. There is also decrease in responsiveness as it becomes more severe. So the patient becomes comatose, and patient might also have hypoglycemia at this point, and patient might also throw into coma or convulsions. So these are all severe signs of dehydration. Even looking at the patient, the loss of fluids can be visible in severe dehydration, like the eye socket is easily visible, the cheekbones and the other parts of the bodies or bones clearly seen. So these are the severe signs of dehydration. So how do we correct the dehydration? We need to give IV fluids, intravenous fluids, for correction of dehydration. When it is severe dehydration, remember the classification of dehydration done by the World Health Organization is commonly used, and it is described very well in the books of community medicine as well as in the pediatrics books of pediatrics. So I am not going to discuss about it in over here. In severe dehydration, we need to give isotonic saline along with isotonic sodium bicarbonate. Isotonic meaning the osmolarity is similar to that of the plasma in the body. So isotonic saline with isotonic sodium bicarbonate. Remember, there is also loss of the bicarbonate ions, so we need to provide that, as well as we need to use sodium and potassium along with water. So this is provided in this form. In absence of isotonic sodium bicarbonate, we can give 5% sodium bicarbonate orally ad libitum, that is, the patient can take it as much as he wants. Potassium is given again in the form of KCl, potassium chloride, by IV infusion in the dose of 15 millimole. Orally it can also be given in the form of the coconut water, that is 200 ml per 1 liter loss of stool or water in the stool. Patients who show the symptom of coma and convulsions are those who have hypoglycemia as well and require instant intravenous glucose infusion. Patients who have collapsed require 100 ml per minute infusion of the saline, and the signs of dehydration are to be monitored. So if the patient is getting hydrated, we can look at the signs of dehydration and whether the signs of dehydration go away, like the skin turgor, it is becoming normal, or the patient is micturating or not. So these are signs which tell us whether the patient is getting rehydrated. And we will also have to note that the patient is not getting overhydrated. Hydrated patients also pose a problem. So like patients might show puffiness of the eye because there is excess of IV fluids that has now deposited into the extracellular spaces. IV therapy is to be continued till the patient is in a status so that he can drink ORS on his own. Until then, the IV therapy is to be continued. Remember, the patient might still have diarrhea. He might be losing so much of water through the fecal route, but still IV therapy has to be continued till the diarrhea stop and the dehydration is complete. Then there is oral rehydration therapy that is used for patients who do not have severe dehydration, like those who are having mild to moderate dehydration and acidosis. Here the ORS, that is oral rehydration salt, is mixed into water and given to the patients. It contains glucose, sodium, potassium, and the other constituent that we will see. So here the importance of glucose is that it enhances the absorption of sodium and water from the small intestine. So what happens in diarrhea is that the intestine is unable to absorb electrolytes and water from the intestinal contents, and this is because most of the channels through which there is absorption of sodium and the passive absorption of water, they are damaged or not functional. The only channel that is active at this stage also is the sodium glucose symporter. So this symporter takes along one molecule of glucose and one ion of sodium. So This import leads to again the drag of water into the intestine towards the blood. So the ORS solution does the same thing. It gives sodium and glucose which are together absorbed and lead to hydration. The advantages of oral rehydration salts are that these are cheaper as compared to the IV formulations. They are easy to administer because they do not require any kind of trained staff, because it is not going to be injected. The solution need not be sterile. So while giving the intravenous therapy, we need to have all aseptic precautions that need not be taken. But we need to remember that the water in which this solution is to be prepared has to be boiled and cooled, or it has to be sterile. It has to be made sterile by some form of therapy. This ORS can be taken or can be given by anybody. Healthcare professionals are not required. Even a mother can give ORS to her child. The ORS is generally administered in differently in adults and children. In children, around 200 to 300 ml per hour is to be administered. It is generally given with spoon to the child, and the child receives this ORS voraciously, and it can be also given ad libitum. But one has to remember, while giving such ORS to the children should also be given water, so that there is no hypernatremia. In adults also we can give this solution ad libitum, but at least 750 to 100 ml of ORS should be administered per hour. The patient needs, if the patient needs rest and he is exhausted, we can give this ORS by nasogastric tube. So what are the contents of ORS? There are different kinds of oral rehydration salts. The most common one that is used is the WHO ORS. By weight, it contains 2.6 grams of sodium chloride, 1.5 gram of potassium chloride, 2.9 grams of sodium citrate, and 13.5 grams of glucose, which is mixed in 1 liter of water. If we look at the osmolarity, sodium is 75, potassium is 20, bicarbonate is 10, glucose is 75, chloride is 65, and the total osmolarity is 245 millimoles per liter. If the same ORS has to be made at home with the ingredients that are present in a kitchen, we need 3/4 of a teaspoon of sodium chloride, that is the table salt, half teaspoon of potassium chloride, 3/4 of teaspoon of the sodium citrate, and 1.5 tablespoon of glucose. If glucose is not available, we can use sucrose in the double dose, or we can also use cooked rice water in the ratio of 1:2.5 as compared to that of glucose. So that has to be again mixed in 1 liter of water. Let us come to the zinc ORS. Zinc ORS has additional zinc component in the ORS. This zinc is an important micronutrient that is important for the gastrointestinal integrity, the local immunity of the GI tract, and during diarrhea this micronutrient is lost. Therefore we need to supplement. So zinc is which will reduce the duration and frequency of diarrhea. It has to be given in the dose of 20 milligram per day of more than 6 months of children more than 6 months of age, while in children less than 6 months of age 10 milligram per day of dose. Then there is something known as cereal based. There is also something known as cereal based ORS. And other than this has come into picture because cereals, the WHO ORS provide both contains glucose as well as and proteins. Sometimes it doesn't reduce the frequency and duration of diarrhea, or it might sometimes increase the frequency
see
of
how
diarrhea
this
because
happens.
of the
Say for
osmolar
example, we
property
use
of
rice in
glucose.
the cereal based
So
ORS.
this is the reason
Rice
why
contains low weight
the cereal based ORS have
that
come into picture,
inhibit
which
the
can reduce the
response of
volume
chloride channel to
losses,
cyclic AMP. So
shorten duration of illness.
cholera toxin acts,
This
and
cereal based
if
ORS
this is inhibited,
generally is
the
produced
secretory
from
diarrhea stops.
rice, which contains
There
low
is
weight
starch present in
fractions
the cereal
that
based
inhibit
ORS,
the
which is a
chloride
polymer of
channels.
glucose.
So
A starch will
via
have a
the
less
cyclic
osmolarity
AMP
as compared
mechanism.
to the
So these
equivalent
chloride channels
number
that
of
are
glucose
being stimulated,
molecules.
that
Due
is
to
how
cholera toxin that we have seen
glucose
earlier in
based
secretory type of
ORS
diarrhea. This type of
might not
mechanism
help
is
in the
inhibited, and
osmotic
these two
drag,
decrease in the
will
volume
cause
loss.
osmotic drag and might not help in diarrhea. The
But,
starch polymer of
when the
glucose that is
osmolarity is
present
less,
in this kind
there
of
will be
ORS
reduction
is
in the
digested in the
volume
intestine and
the
slowly
stool output.
absorbed through the
proteins that are
intestine.
contained in cereal based
So
ORS provide
that
amino
is how
acids,
there is a
which
very
also
less
enhance the
osmolarity.
sodium absorption,
The
and along
osmolarity
with
of
it,
this
water
kind
is
of
also
ORS is
absorbed,
very
so
less
it is
as
similar to
compared
that
the
of the glucose
same
sodium
amount of glucose.
cotransporters.
Remember the number of molecules.
all in all,
are
there is a
important
less
in
osmotic
osmolarity.
drag,
So
and
starch is a
with
polymer
the
of
help
glucose,
of
which will have less
the
osmolarity as compared to
proteins.
the
There is
equivalent
also
glucose
enhanced
that is
absorption
present
of
in the
sodium and
WHO
water.
ORS.
So this is how
The
cereal
proteins
based
are
ORS
also present
superior,
in these
superior
cereals,
to the
which
WHO
provide
ORS.
amino acids.
I would like
And
to
the
also
another mechanism by which the sodium can get absorbed is
point
through
out
the
that the sodium
amino acid
glucose
sodium
have
transporter.
equal
This
osmolarity,
again has
that
the
is
same mechanism
75
like the glucose
millimole per
sodium
liter.
co-transporter.
This is
which
because
leads to
sodium and glucose
more
are absorbed
absorption of
together
fluids.
by the sodium glucose
So this
co-transporters.
cereal based ORS, as I already told, has a less osmotic drag. So that was about the treatment of dehydration. Now let us come to the specific treatment depending upon the cause of the diarrhea. So depending upon the cause of diarrhea, we are looking at the cause as the infections. These infections could be due to bacteria, protozoa, or virus. So as you can see the picture in the text in the blue, that is Shigella, Salmonella, Campylobacter, E. coli, Entamoeba histolytica, and Cryptosporidium. They have common presentation in the form of severe diarrhea along with fever and blood in stools, that is dysentery. So this presentation is common with these infections. They can be even protozoal infections as well as bacterial infections. But in the diarrhea with Cryptosporidium, there is marked fatigue and the stool examination doesn't show any kind of protozoa or bacteria. So that is how we can come to conclusion of the cryptosporidiasis. In case of E. coli, there are different strains of E. coli like enterotoxigenic, enteroinvasive, enteropathogenic. So among these, enterotoxigenic diarrhea is known as the traveler's diarrhea, which shows watery stool, low grade fever, malaise, and nausea. The other types are show dysentery symptoms due to invasion of the gastrointestinal mucosa. The Vibrio cholera shows rice water stool with severe dehydration, which is a type of secretory diarrhea. Clostridium difficile shows dysentery, that is loss of blood in the stools, which is caused by the antibiotic induced diarrhea. Then Giardia causes vomiting, so that is one of the additional features. The viral diarrhea is similar to those of the bacterial diarrhea, and it is additionally having no stool, no features in the stool of bacteria or protozoa. So depending upon the clinical examination or the history taken from the patients and the microscopic examination of stool, the gross and microscopic examination of stool, one can come to the conclusion of the probable cause of infection. Accordingly, antimicrobial agents can be given. Remember, it is the only infectious diarrhea that needs to be treated with antimicrobial agents. So for Shigella, Salmonella, we have fluoroquinolones like ciprofloxacin, norfloxacin. We have cotrimoxazole, which is a combination of sulfamethoxazole and trimethoprim. In severe cases, ceftriaxone, that is a cephalosporin, can also be given. For E. coli infections, again cotrimoxazole and fluoroquinolones can be used. For Vibrio infection, we can use doxycycline, which is a tetracycline, single dose 100 milligram, or we can use fluoroquinolone. For Campylobacter infections, we have azithromycin, which is a macrolide. For Clostridium difficile, we have metronidazole, which is specially useful in anaerobic infections, bacterial infections. In case of Entamoeba histolytica and Giardia infections, again we have metronidazole because it has additional amebicide properties. For Cryptosporidium, again we have azithromycin. In case of viral diarrhea, where we have no negative stool examination, there is no need to treat such cases, and the diarrhea is self-limiting. Now this is the third part, that is the symptomatic and supportive treatment. So we'll start with the symptomatic treatment of diarrhea. There are gastrointestinal protective agents and adsorbents which can be used during diarrhea. They act by protecting the gastrointestinal mucosa by coating, or they can adsorb the toxins or drugs that cause diarrhea. So in this way they symptomatically help the patients of diarrhea. Now one has to remember that if such drugs which adsorb the toxins and other drugs on their surface can also prevent the action of antibiotics or anticholinergics that are also given for treatment of diarrhea. So such drug interaction is probable in when these drugs are given together. These kinds of drugs have limited use in mild diarrhea, and these agents are bismuth salts, which have astringent property as well as they have adsorbent and antimicrobial action. This salt is commonly used for treatment of H. pylori induced peptic ulcer. We have pectin, which has physical coating property, which leads to production of firm stools in the patients of diarrhea. We also have activated wood charcoal, which is mostly used in toxin induced diarrhea or any kind of poisoning, where it acts as a adsorbent and leads to adsorption of the toxic surface. Then we have drugs that give symptomatic relief by decreasing the gastrointestinal motility and reducing the secretions. So the first in class is the opioid group of drugs. They are not used in infective diarrhea because they reduce the gastrointestinal motility and secretions, which can lead to more proliferation of bacteria in the intestine. Remember, diarrhea is a reflex by which the body wants to throw out the infective organism from the intestine, and if we reduce the GI motility and prevent the expulsion of these harmful organisms, they are going to proliferate inside. So that is why they are not to be used in infective diarrhea. They are not used in irritable bowel disease because it might lead to paralytic ileus. In children of less than 2 years and in elderly, these drugs are not used because they have higher respiratory depression as compared to that in adults. Opioids are used in the form of diphenoxylate atropine combination and loperamide. Diphenoxylate is a very addictive substance, and it is combined with atropine because when atropine is added to it, look at the dose of atropine, that is 0.025 milligrams. At this dose only the most prominent adverse effect or the first adverse effect that can be seen with atropine is the decreased secretions in the form of drying of mouth. So whenever the patient takes this drug, there is drying of mouth, which can discourage the patient from taking this combination as a addictive substance. We also have loperamide, which is commonly used to reduce the GI motility and secretions. So how do these opioids act is these opioids, they reduce the GI motility. They act on all phases of peristalsis, the cholinergic phase, the prostaglandin phase, as well as the initial reflex, and all of these put together there is no peristalsis. This is one way by which the food contents and the fluids in the intestine remain are exposed for a longer time towards the intestinal mucosa, and there is absorption of these contents. Again, opioids also reduce the secretions from the GI mucosa, which ultimately reduce the bulk of or the fluid of the fluid present in the stools. So this is how opioids act. We have resicadotril. This is a drug which inhibits the encapsulinase enzyme that is present on the gastrointestinal membranes. This enzyme is important for degradation of the endogenous opioids or enkephalins that are produced locally at the intestinal levels. So when this drug is given, these enzymes are inhibited, and there is availability of these endogenous opioids and enkephalins, which act by the same way that I have discussed with the opioids, and reduce the frequency of stools, as well as the amount of fluid loss. Then we have anticholinergic drugs, which are atropine substitutes. These drugs relieve the colic, which is associated with diarrhea. Patient is relieved of the abdominal pain. There is decrease in the gastrointestinal motility as well as secretions. So the atropine substitutes like hyoscine and propanthelin are used for the same. The prostaglandin inhibitors are they act on the sensitive phase. Remember, prostaglandins also increase the gastrointestinal motility. Therefore, the aspirin and indomethacin, which are prostaglandin inhibitors, also have a role to play in patients with specific causes of diarrhea where prostaglandins are released. There is a chloride channel inhibitor like crofelemer, which is useful in non-infective diarrhea, and this is specifically indicated in patients who are on antiretroviral therapy. Now we have seen the symptomatic treatment. Let us look at the supportive treatment that needs to be given to the patients of diarrhea. We have probiotics. These are live non-pathogenic bacteria or fungi. The bacteria that we have is lactobacillus, and the fungi or yeast that we have is Saccharomyces boulardii. So these non-pathogenic live organisms are given by oral route, and these organisms produce acetic acid, lactic acid, and propionic acid, which lead to increase in the acidity or reduction in the intestinal pH, and this decrease in the pH leads to inhibition of growth of pathogenic intestinal bacteria. The probiotics also prevent adhesion of the pathogenic bacteria towards the gastrointestinal mucosa. They also enhance the immune response, and probiotics are commonly used in infectious diarrhea, antibiotic induced diarrhea, irritable bowel disease, and inflammatory bowel syndrome. So in these different kinds causes of diarrhea, we can use probiotics. Remember, probiotics when given along with antibiotics, they will also be getting killed along with the pathogenic bacteria and won't be having any effect. Probiotics may cause serious infections if given in severely immunocompromised patients. So they are not to be given in patients who have neutropenia, who are having who are on steroids, or who are AIDS patient. The nutritional support is again very important thing that needs to be uh, looked upon in patients of diarrhea. Remember, diarrhea in children is the very common cause of death and malnourishment, stunted growth. So every patient of diarrhea, even if the patient of diarrhea doesn't die, there is a lag in the growth, and that might lead to delaying of the milestones of such children. So there is a catabolic state that ensues whenever a patient suffers from diarrhea, that leads to inhibition of growth and development. So diarrhea is a very important entity that has led to morbidity and mortality among the pediatric population. It doesn't mean that in adults it doesn't have anything to do. Even in adults it can lead to exhaustion, and it takes time for the person to recover and gain his routine. So patients with diarrhea are to be given water and electrolytes to start with. The water should be boiled, and the other fluids that can be given are like fruit juice and buttermilk, and salted biscuits for electrolytes. Starchy foods are given which are easy to digest, and which lead to release of glucose in the gastrointestinal tract, and they cause reduction in fluid loss, as we have seen with the cereal based ORS. The diet can be started with soft rice, banana, or cooked apple once the patient can eat, and the usual diet can be resumed later on. One has to remember that milk and milk products are to be avoided, except for buttermilk. These substances, these milk and milk product contains lactose, and patients who have recovered from diarrhea have transient lactase deficiency. So the lactose in the milk will be remaining undigested and can lead to again osmotic diarrhea. Then we have another symptom complex, that is chronic diarrhea, the causes of which we have already discussed. These are chronic medical conditions or some autoimmune diseases that can lead to chronic diarrhea. Chronic diarrhea for more than 3 to 4 weeks is termed as chronic diarrhea. Treatment is based on the cause of diarrhea. Say for example, diarrhea seen with autonomic dysfunction in diabetic patients can be given the alpha 2 agonist like clonidine. For the today's lecture, I have taken the reference from the book Pharmacology and Pharmacotherapeutics, 25th edition of Dr. R.S. Satoskar. Thank you all for your patient listening.